Hello, Meoni here, and welcome back to another video for Final Fantasy XIV. This a news video talking about the discussion on third-party tools, specifically in reference to the Lodestone Post that we're going to read through in just a moment, which addresses from Naoki Yoshida, the producer and director of Final Fantasy XIV, his point of view, and indeed the clamping down, seemingly, of the usability of third-party tools in a public environment, and to reiterate the terms of service. So that's basically what this is. For more information on the terms of service, there will be a link in the description of this video. That's been readily available since A Realm Reborn and has been updated regularly as well. So that's been in place for a very long time. And from what I can tell, this post is simply reiterating what was already posted and what was already public knowledge. Let's get straight to it. He says, with the release of 6.11 and Dragon Song's Reprise Ultimate, we've heard concerns from players about the use of third-party tools and the potential for game server emulation. I've touched on these topics previously in live letters, but I would like to take this opportunity to formally address them. So he says this is going to be a lengthy post. That's fine by me. So the use of third-party tools, this is their exact stance on this, and it has always been pretty much. As stated in the terms of service for 14, the use of third-party tools is strictly prohibited. Players who are determined to be using third-party tools will have their account suspended or permanently banned for repeat offences, end quote. Nice and simple for you. If there's something outside of the game that basically gives you an advantage or allows you to hack the game or use things that aren't necessarily there in the game at the time you're actually, there. If you're a content creator, for example, and there's something in the game files that's not been released, these are all bannable offenses if proven. These are all ways that you can mess up your time in a game is by getting attached to these third-party things. It's stated very clearly there and has been in the terms of service previously. Personally, I think this is nothing new. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been there forever, pretty much. So then, defining third-party tools. So this is the bit that's probably the most important for most people, the definition of what a third-party tool actually is and what's, the thing that they're actually going to take action upon. He says, we have received requests from players asking that we define what tools are and aren't permissible. But to do so would require an assessment of all third-party tools available on the internet, as well as all gaming devices and their functionality. Unfortunately, such an undertaking is physically impossible, he says, which is why we decided to simply prohibit the use of all third-party tools and software. By the same token, it is impossible for us to check what programs are installed on every player's PC. This is why we cannot identify and reprimand offenders 100% of the time. To offer more clarity on the process, here's a few examples of the rule violations we prioritize for investigation. So these are the categories of what they're actually looking for perpetrators that they can catch. So the first one is use of tools that allow players to more easily complete content. This would be in reference to things such as timers externally to the game, programs doing callouts, or visual markers being presented in a file as well. That stuff exists on the market, in the black market. It is against terms of service. The modification of the UI to display additional information. So this actually implies things such as parsing, use of packet spoofing tools, and also any actions or public statements that promote the use of third-party tools. So, for example, anything in the public eye that's in promotion of third-party tools. For example, if you were to say you were pro like you should go and download ACT, for example, that would be in violation of that if that was in a public, like imagine a streamer, for example, something like that. All reports of such activity warrant investigation, he says, and accounts determined to be in violation of the game's terms of service will be suspended or banned. Unless there is a significant change to the terms of service, which would be publicly announced, this rule remains as is, end quote. So that's basically the definition. They're not going to go and sit through every single add-on or, text-based thing or like hack or whatever, it would just be too much. It would be a waste of their time. There would always be something else. It's like, something that's not on the list, then I can use that. So that would bring the wrong attitude towards this. So it's fairly impossible for you to expect Square Enix to sit down and go, this is fine and this isn't fine. This is fine and this isn't fine. Generally, common sense is something that kind of crops up here, I think, for the most part. But yeah, that's, if it looks like it's a third-party tool, then it would probably, be seen as such in the public eye. You're probably best not using it, and certainly not with streaming, that or YouTube videos and stuff like that. Probably not a good idea. Hacks, mods, and risk of infection from malicious software. This is a good point. Hacks are alterations of a program that can allow for otherwise impossible things to happen. For Final Fantasy XIV, which relies on server-client communication, hacking is much more difficult than in other online games. Moreover, our security measures are being improved upon constantly, and we will continue to bolster them into the future. Supplementary tools known as mods, however, do a number of things, such as display additional information sent by the 14 servers on screen, or send false packet information to change the location of characters. In the case of the latter, we have systems in place to automatically check and inspect system logs, allowing us to immediately take action against cheaters when discovered. In short, the use of such tools will not allow players to automatically clear high-end content, yet carries a high risk of being penalized, so we ask that you refrain from using them. We receive many inquiries regarding infection by viruses and spyware that steal passwords after downloading third-party tools and plugins. To keep your system secure, we ask that you exercise judgment and refrain from needlessly downloading third-party tools or software of unknown origins, end quote. Top tip there, even if you are, on the side of being pro-mod, it's very dangerous, actually. A lot of these things obviously aren't vetted, especially some of the things that are out there. They're from weird websites or weird domains or GitHubs and stuff like that. Probably not the best plan to suddenly download and install these things or use them. You do not know what's happening. It's not possible for you to always know. A little update here, a little exploit here, then before you know it, you're paying for something in the Seychelles that you never even intended to buy, and then you realize your credit card information's been spoofed. So yeah, be safe. It's probably not a good idea. Other points, enhancements to the HUD and other UI elements. So this is a really interesting one. He says, we believe that people use the aforementioned tools to expand the HUD and display more information because they feel that the existing functions are insufficient for tackling high-end duties. In recognition of this, we intend to review the most prominent tools, and in order to discourage their use, endeavor to enhance the functionality of the HUD. Though it will take some time, we're determined to make it happen, not least for the benefit of those who play on consoles, end quote. So the good thing that came out of this kind of like sudden, reminder, let's call it, of the terms of service, is that they've kind of latched onto the idea, by they I mean Square Enix, have latched onto the idea that, not everybody is using a third-party tool to maybe, get an advantage in the game through exploitation, but some people are just wanting to move their HUD around or have things in a specific place. That's something that I think that is very nice of them and brave of them to, to admit that maybe the HUD could do with some tweaks and maybe there should be some new additions to that. So I think that's a really positive outcome from this. That's the silver lining, is that they're going to take that on board and go, you know what, maybe we should ape some of these things that are most popular, or at least the most downloaded, and then go like, hey, well, maybe we should have like different skins for things, or like more functionality in moving things or resizing elements. They've come a long way, honestly, since A Realm Reborn, personally. Like, you've seen it like evolve over time, but there's a long way to go. I think we'll agree. So next up, we have a section on high-end duties and world races. It goes without saying that we're aware of world races for high-end duties. As the developers, we're proud to have grown into one of the few games where they're held, and it delights us to see so many players participate as well as spectate with great interest. But a race should be fair, he says, and it's our earnest wish that participants don't use third-party tools. Indeed, we've only released duties that we have proven can be beaten with the game's standard features. Without a doubt, patch 6.11's Dragonsong Reprise is the hardest duty we've ever created. Some may compare it to the unending coil of Bahamut, but taking into account our players' improved skill, the increased number of actions and the more complex mechanics, this latest Ultimate entry has the edge. To be able to conquer it in such a short time requires great individual prowess, teamwork, and support, and you can consider this gamer thoroughly impressed. Because such races are unofficial, we usually limit our involvement to some comments after a number of teams have cleared the duty, by offering our congratulations via the official Twitter account and confirming timestamps. We want to recognize your achievements and contribute to community excitement. However, if our recognition encourages excessive competition and controversy to the extent that players resort to the use of third-party tools, I regret to say we may have to reconsider making comments in the future. End quote. So you'll also notice that this is one of the reasons they didn't directly congratulate anyone this time. That's not to imply that any particular individual or team was using tools that, would gain an advantage. But I think it's more of a statement that, this is like, we can't have this and we can't publicly acknowledge this if there's screenshots and footage of such, blatant use of. So I think that's fair, to be honest with you. I don't see how that's a big deal. It is always nice to have the recognition of the people that create the game that you play, especially if you play at a high level. I mean, I could only ever dream of playing something like an Ultimate. I was on the edge of my seat watching people, on Twitch that were streaming it, going, oh my God, come on. And then you get to that last phase. And then what you thought was the last phase, and then there's like phase 7, and it's like, what is this? It was thrilling to watch. But yeah, I can understand why they want it to be like a fair across-the-board thing. Will this completely deter people? Who knows, right? At the end of the day, it is, as they say, against the terms of service, and it looks like they're actioning upon this stuff. So it's probably, we might see less people streaming as a result of that, right? Or in the public eye for those world races, so that they can't be possibly implicated. Because at the end of the day, if you're on a team of 8 people and one person's using a tool, and like it could be possibly like if it was doing call outs or something, then that's going to obviously, be on the footage of that person who's streaming, who's not. So it might cost them all their progression. So it's going to be very difficult to sort of gauge. But it is what it is. The rules are there. So it does look like they're not too happy about it. And I can see why, honestly. Data mining and screenshot leaks. Here we go. So this is a really important one. Due to an oversight in the development team's part, model data for Dragonsong's Reprise was present in 6.08 data. The data was mined and the appearance of the raid's final boss was made public. Such data is normally masked and cannot be discovered, but this time it slipped through our checks. In addition, at virtually the same time the patch was released, a screenshot from a phase that players had yet to be reached was leaked. We believe it came from an insider, oh dear, and are in the middle of a thorough investigation. We refrained from making this known earlier because it would make the investigation more difficult if a suspect were aware of it. Such leaks, he says, are utterly unacceptable, for they not only undermine the efforts of the development and operation teams, but also take away from our players' enjoyment. Previously, when a major leak occurred prior to release of Shadowbringers, we succeeded in identifying the culprit and took legal action. That there has been another leak despite this is deeply concerning, and in addition to bringing the offender to account, we'll take measures to prevent a repeat of the situation. That's a good thing. I like the take on this. He says, now, be it graphical resources or something else, there may be legal ramifications for mining private data via illicit means with the intent to make it public. Perhaps due to high interest, however, you've been seeing websites that openly release mined graphical data. As a show of our admiration for those who clear ultimate raids, we designed their reward weapons to be as eye-catching as possible, and to widely spread their images outside of the game could diminish players' motivation to earn them. I've made this request before and I'll make it again. Please refrain from disseminating mined data, end quote. So this comes down to two things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. If something is accessible or posted somewhere, you're probably in your best interest to not share this. Recently, in that patch, I myself have seen so many people ask me a question: where is the drink tea emote? Where is the drink tea emote? If it wasn't for the people asking that question to me and them basically realizing that was from like data mined information, I wouldn't know that existed. So the fact is that got released today at the time of recording on the 10th of May, right? But we shouldn't have really known about that information until now. But, you know, it's proof of the fact that if people were to, for example, use third-party tools to create a video on that stuff, that would be incredibly, like, that is essentially, as they say, legal ramifications for mining private data via illicit means with the intent to make it public. That's YouTube and Twitch. That's posting on a Discord server or social media. People have got to be more clever about this. They've got to think to themselves, hey, am I going to get in trouble for this? And if their answer is even remotely yes, then it's a really terrible idea. Legal action is not something you want to be involved in. It's not something that is worth it in the slightest. Just to share like a picture of something or an upcoming emote or like a mount, for example, or weapons in this case, as they've directly stated here. Like, essentially this is in reference to people who have made coverage of unreleased items, right, as well. It's a bad idea. There are legal ramifications, and it's one of the reasons why I have obviously the time I've been doing YouTube, I've made very careful that what I'm releasing is, you know, obviously earned in the game. I go out of my way to actually go and collect a series of weapons to show them in a video. People who watch my Twitch streams have seen, you know, live the time it took me to get, for example, all of the resistance weapons for that video showcase at the end. It might not have been the first video out, but at least it was a legitimate video. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, no one should be taking that risk. I refuse to take the risk in the slightest because of the terms of service. And at the end of the day, if they have perhaps, you know, gone that direction, legal action, you just don't mess with it. You just do not mess with it. It's not a good idea. Server emulation is the next bit. It says, the leaks outlined above have led some to speculate that groups may have used server emulators to figure out the progression timeline for this battle. Interesting. However, YoshiP says, 14 is run by a variety of independent programs operating on a multitude of specialized servers, so to completely emulate its server environment outside of our infrastructure is impossible. It would cost tens of millions of yen just to obtain the necessary servers. Without these servers in their proprietary programming, while one could potentially pull the client software and display model data and the like, the game itself will not operate. Even if one were to somehow accomplish such a feat, it would still be physically impossible to run the unique programming introduced to the servers upon the application of each patch before the patch is even released. The progression timeline for each duty exists solely within this server-side code and is never included in the patch data downloaded to players' clients. I apologize for any undue concern caused by these rumors, which themselves were sparked by the aforementioned leaks, as once again, we assure you that we will conduct a full investigation to prevent this from happening in the future. So basically, server emulation is impossible. Just to reiterate, there was a rumor going around again from that leak, so, you know, because obviously the picture of that particular phase was of in-game, so it kind of implied that someone had access to the game early. It wasn't the case. Basically, it was an internal leak from the looks of this, and it was a, you know, screenshot taken on the Square Enix side and then leaked, which is still a terrible thing to happen, but there isn't a group of players somewhere in the world progressing on their private server before everyone else, unfortunately. You know, as much as people would like that to be their true reality, it's not going to happen. So he says, in conclusion, thanks to our devoted warriors of light, Final Fantasy XIV has grown into a titan among games. This means that it is now home to players from all walks of life, and not just long-time 14 fans, but those who have recently come to join us from a myriad other game communities as well. Many more eyes are now on 14, and posting about it garners a great deal of attention, which has changed how information is shared online and spreads throughout the player base. With this in mind, I would like to encourage the development of a strong 14 community by continuing to provide commentary as I have today. Truly, I cannot apologize enough for the many mistakes we made in 6.1 and the resulting disappointment in such a major patch. Nevertheless, we intend to forge ahead so that 14 may continue to bring joy to as many players as possible, and we hope you will stay with us on this journey. Naoki Yoshida, producer and director of Final Fantasy XIV, end quote. Honestly, the man apologizes too much, in my personal opinion. 6.1, I mean, the big issue, obviously, is the housing, right? That's something that didn't go to plan, which, you know, people have been very heated and very upset about, you know, reasonably so. But they're doing everything they can to address that. In regards to anything else, though, I think 6.1 delivered one of the best 0.1 patches I've experienced in this game. If you compare this, for example, to everybody always likes to say that Heavensward was the best expansion. Whilst I agree to some extent, like I enjoyed Heavensward a lot, you got to remember like the 0.1 patch for that was Lord of Verminion, and there's nothing worse than Lord of Verminion. And on that note, thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are catching up with this information. I know that it was a long one, and some of you have probably already read through this, but thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.